The massive doors of the council chamber groaned open, revealing a vast amphitheater filled with hundreds of delegates from across the galaxy. James Hawkeye Hawkins straightened his formal diplomatic attire, already feeling constrained by the stiff collar and tight sleeves that restricted his movement. Standing at 6'4" with broad shoulders that strained against the fabric, he cut an imposing figure by any galactic standard. "Ready for this circus?" he muttered to his companion. Beside him, Zyara of Kythrek barely acknowledged the question with a slight nod. Though slimmer than James, her feline-like grace, disguised, coiled muscles developed from a lifetime on a planet that made Earth seem like a vacation resort. Her pale blue skin was marked with natural striations, evolutionary adaptations that camouflaged her against Kythrek's crystalline forests. Her eyes, large and amber with vertical pupils, scanned the room methodically, missing nothing. "They're afraid," she observed quietly. "I can smell it." James grunted in agreement. Even without enhanced senses, he could read the subtle signs. The way conversations halted as they entered, how delegates leaned away when they walked past, the nervous shuffling of appendages among the more anxious species. "Welcome to the joys of being Deathworlders," he replied, terrifying the locals since humanity first joined the galactic community. An attendant, a tall, willowy being with translucent skin that revealed pulsing organs beneath, approached them hesitantly. "Delegates Hawkins and Zyara," it said in a tremulous voice, "please follow me for security screening." James raised an eyebrow. "Again? We already went through 3 checkpoints to get here." "Council regulations, sir," the attendant whispered, not meeting his eyes. 4. High classification visitors. "High classification," Zyara repeated flatly. "You mean Deathworlders." The attendant's skin flushed a deep purple, confirming the euphemism. James sighed but nodded in acquiescence. They'd expected this reception. After all, beings from planets like Earth and Kythrek, worlds with extreme gravity, toxic atmospheres, dangerous predators, and harsh climates, were rare among the Galactic Council. Most spacefaring civilizations evolved on gentle worlds with minimal environmental pressures. The security scan was noticeably more thorough than what James had observed other delegates receiving. Multiple guards hovered nearby, their weapons poorly concealed. One of them, a squat reptilian with a prominent crest, kept a trembling claw on his sidearm the entire time. "If I were going to kill everyone here," James muttered under his breath, "I wouldn't need weapons." Zyara shot him a warning glance. "Not helping our case," she whispered. Once cleared, they were escorted to their assigned seating, at the far edge of the chamber, isolated from other delegations. As they settled in, James noticed several delegates from neighboring sections discreetly moving to create an even wider berth around them. "I'm starting to wonder why we agreed to this," he grumbled. "Because both our worlds need the alliance," Zyara reminded him. "Without collective defense, the pirate raids will continue. Your colonies on Proxima Centauri lost 3 outposts last cycle. My homeworld lost 5. James nodded grimly. She was right, of course. Earth's expansion into nearby stars had been plagued by increasingly sophisticated pirate attacks. Kythrek faced similar problems. Their respective governments had reluctantly sent them, experienced combat veterans with diplomatic credentials, to advocate for a more aggressive defense policy. A soft chime signaled the start of proceedings, and the hovering translation drones adjusted their positions. At the center of the chamber, High Counselor Varix rose from his seat, a gelatinous being whose transparent body housed swirling colors that shifted with his moods. "Distinguished delegates," Varix began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. "We convene today to discuss the proposed Collective Defense Treaty, a comprehensive agreement that will unite our peaceful worlds against the growing threat of interstellar piracy and potential aggression from beyond our borders." As Varix continued outlining the agenda, James noticed a cluster of delegates to their right whispering and casting nervous glances their way. He nudged Zyara and tilted his head slightly in their direction. "Delegation from Proxima Centauri, Ambassador Melkin's group," she murmured. "They've been watching us since we entered." Hostile body language. James frowned. "Melkin?" Isn't he from Salix Prime? Their colony was hit hard last month. You'd think they'd be our biggest supporters. Something's not right, Zyara agreed. That entire delegation seems anxious beyond normal fear of Deathworlders. Their conversation was interrupted as a server approached, offering refreshments. James accepted a crystal flute containing a pale blue liquid. He sniffed it cautiously, a habit from military days, before taking a sip. The reaction was immediate and violent. His face contorted, and he barely managed to swallow rather than spray the liquid across the delegates in front of him. Gods of Earth, he gasped, eyes watering. What is this? Sanitizer? The server looked mortified. It's Laminian spring water, sir. Considered the finest in the galaxy. James glanced around, noticing several delegates watching his reaction with evident amusement. One even made a notation on their datapad. It's refreshing, he managed diplomatically, setting the glass down. Maybe a bit subtle for my palate. Zyara's lips quirked in a rare display of humor. What he means is that Deathworlders typically require stronger flavors. Our evolution favored those who could detect toxins quickly. This explanation only seemed to unnerve the server further, who quickly moved on to other delegates. James noticed that conversation around them had quieted, with many delegates now openly staring. High Counselor Varix continued, and now, we have requested special insight from representatives of high-gravity worlds with experience in combat operations. Delegate Hawkins of Earth and Delegate Zyara of Kythrek, please approach the central podium. James and Zyara exchanged glances and rose simultaneously. Their movement caused a ripple of unease through the chamber, subtle shifts of posture, barely perceptible recoils. As they made their way down to the presentation area, James was acutely aware of how different they were from the chamber's other occupants. Where most delegates moved with fluid, almost fragile grace, their own movements were economical, powerful, and controlled. Predators among prey. At the podium, James activated the holographic display with their prepared presentation. A three-dimensional map of the galactic sector materialized, with red markers indicating recent pirate attacks. Distinguished delegates, James began, what you're seeing is a pattern of increasingly sophisticated raids over the past 3 cycles. These aren't random attacks, but a coordinated strategy targeting shipments of specific materials and technologies. Zyara stepped forward. The attack vectors suggest intimate knowledge of shipping routes and schedules, information that should be restricted to council members. A murmur of concern rippled through the chamber. Are you accusing someone in this chamber of collusion with pirates? The sharp question came from Ambassador Melkin, a willowy being with delicate, gossamer-like appendages that trembled with what appeared to be indignation. We're presenting facts, Ambassador, James replied evenly. The conclusion seems obvious, but we haven't accused anyone specifically. Yet you Deathworlders bring violence and paranoia into these halls. Melkin's voice rose dramatically. My people have suffered greatly from these pirates, and now you suggest we might be responsible? Zyara's expression remained impassive. Interesting that you immediately personalized a general observation, Ambassador. We said nothing about Salix Prime specifically. The chamber grew tense as Melkin's skin flushed a deep amber. This is precisely why bringing your kind into peaceful negotiations is dangerous. You see threats everywhere because that's how your brutal world shaped you. Before James could respond, High Counselor Varix intervened. Let us maintain decorum. The delegates are presenting their analysis, not leveling accusations. James nodded gratefully to Varix and continued, detailing their proposed defensive strategies, coordinated patrol routes, improved intelligence sharing, and rapid response protocols. Throughout the presentation, he noticed that the chamber had essentially divided into 2 factions, those listening with genuine interest and those clustered around Melkin, who regarded them with open suspicion or fear. When they concluded and returned to their seats, the division became even more pronounced as delegates rose to ask questions or offer comments. Some expressed support for the defensive measures, while others, led by Melkin, argued against militarizing council space. We cannot allow a panic-driven response to these incidents, Melkin declared dramatically. The solution is better communication and understanding, not weapons and warriors. These Deathworlders see only threats because they come from worlds of constant violence. The session ended with no clear consensus, only an agreement to continue discussions the following day. As delegates filed out, James and Zyara remained seated, observing the interactions and alliances forming around them. That went about as well as expected, James muttered. Actually, better than I anticipated, Zyara replied. At least 17 delegates appeared receptive. That's more than either of our briefings predicted. As they finally rose to leave, a small, mottled being approached them furtively, looking nervously over its shoulder. Delegates, it whispered, I have information you need to hear. Not here. The Lower Market District, establishment called Stellar Whispers. 2 hours after final bell. Before they could respond, the being scurried away, blending into the crowd of departing delegates. James watched it go with narrowed eyes. Could be a trap. Zyara nodded. Almost certainly is. Question is, set by whom, and for what purpose? Only one way to find out. James straightened his shoulders. Looks like we're going out tonight. Indeed. Zyara's amber eyes gleamed with something that might have been anticipation. And I suspect we won't be dressed like diplomats. The night market district pulsed with chaotic energy, a stark contrast to the sterile elegance of the council chambers. Neon signs in dozens of languages bathed the narrow streets in garish colors, while vendors hawked everything from exotic foodstuffs to questionably legal tech modifications. The air was thick with the mingled sense of cooking food, alien perfumes, and the distinct tang of intoxicants from 100 worlds. James and Zyara moved through this sensory assault with practiced ease, having abandoned their formal attire for more practical clothing. James wore a simple dark jacket that concealed both his muscular build and the compact stunner holstered at his hip. Zyara had opted for a form-fitting bodysuit of Kithrikian design, its materials seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. This feels more natural, James commented as they navigated the crowded thoroughfare. Diplomatic halls make my skin itch. You preferred combat zones to officer meetings, Zyara recalled from their previous missions together. Some things never change. They located Stellar Whispers in a relatively quiet corner of the district, a dimly lit establishment with a clientele diverse enough that they wouldn't immediately stand out. Inside, holographic privacy screens separated booths, creating islands of conversation in the smoky atmosphere. No sooner had they settled into a booth than James spotted their contact slipping through the entrance. The mottled being approached cautiously, eyes darting to every corner of the room before sliding into the seat across from them. You weren't followed? It asked anxiously. If we were, it's already too late, James replied bluntly. What's this about? The being, which James now recognized as a Vexian, a species known for their information brokering, placed a small device on the table. A tap activated a privacy field that would scramble any surveillance. My name is Trill. I work in shipping logistics for the Council, the Vexian explained. For months, I've been noticing irregularities in certain cargo manifests. Military-grade weapons and shield technology diverted through shell companies. Zyara leaned forward. Connected to the pirate raids? Trill nodded vigorously. The diversions always happen just before a major attack. I started tracking the pattern, tracing the authorization codes. The Vexian's voice dropped to a whisper. They all lead back to Ambassador Melkin's office. James and Zyara exchanged glances. That's a serious accusation, James said carefully. Do you have proof? Trill slid a data chip across the table. Everything I've compiled. Financial transactions, authorization codes, communication logs. Melkin is supplying the pirates with weapons and intelligence. Why would he do that? Zyara asked. His own colony was attacked. A carefully orchestrated attack that destroyed empty warehouses while missing valuable targets, Trill explained. Classic misdirection. Melkin's faction wants to create a crisis they can solve on their terms, by increasing surveillance and control over all Council worlds. James pocketed the data chip. And they don't want Deathworlders involved because we'd see through the deception. Precisely, Trill confirmed. Your combat experience makes you dangerous to them. You understand tactics and can recognize staged attacks. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion at the entrance. 3 large figures in dark attire were questioning the host, who pointed nervously in their direction. We've been compromised, Zyara stated calmly, already calculating escape routes. There's a back exit through the kitchen, Trill said urgently. Go. I'll delay them. James hesitated. They'll kill you. I'm already dead if Melkin discovers my betrayal, Trill replied grimly. At least this way the information gets out. Without further argument, James and Zyara moved swiftly toward the kitchen, keeping low and using other patrons as visual cover. Behind them, they heard Trill engaging the pursuers in loud conversation, playing the role of an intoxicated patron. The kitchen staff barely registered surprise as the 2 Deathworlders slipped through. Years of operating in hostile environments had taught them how to move with purpose without causing alarm. They had almost reached the back door when it burst open, revealing 2 more armed figures. Complications, Zyara noted dryly, shifting her stance to a combat posture so fluid it appeared almost casual. The attackers hesitated momentarily, a fatal mistake when facing Deathworlders. In that split second of indecision, Zyara launched herself forward with blinding speed. Her first strike disabled one attacker's weapon arm with a precise hit to the nerve cluster. Her second move was a sweeping leg maneuver that sent the being crashing into a rack of cooking implements. James engaged the second attacker with equally efficient brutality. A quick sidestep avoided a clumsy, stunned baton swing, followed by a counterattack that drove the air from the attacker's respiratory system. The being doubled over, and James delivered a precise blow to the base of the skull, rendering it unconscious. We need one conscious for questioning, Zyara reminded him, securing her own opponent with restraints pulled from a concealed pocket. This one's breathing, James confirmed, checking his opponent's vital signs. Barely. They're not professionals. Too hesitant. Poor coordination. A crash from a main room indicated that Trill's distraction had ended. More attackers would be coming through the restaurant any moment. Time to leave, Zyara decided, hefting the semi-conscious attacker over her shoulder with surprising ease. Bring the data. We need a secure location to question this one. They slipped out into the night, melting into the crowds of the market district with their captive. Behind them, shouts of frustration echoed from stellar whispers as their pursuers discovered their quarry had escaped. 2 hours later, in the relative security of their diplomatic quarters, which James had thoroughly swept for surveillance devices, they had answers. Their captive, now fully conscious but restrained, had proven surprisingly willing to talk after Zyara had demonstrated her intimate knowledge of pressure points on most humanoid species. Melkin hired us through intermediaries, the being admitted, wincing as feeling returned to its temporarily paralyzed limbs. Said 2 dangerous Deathworlders were threatening Council security. Paid good credits to have you eliminated discreetly. And the Council security uniforms we found in your equipment? James asked, holding up the distinctive insignia they discovered. The attacker looked away. Part of the plan. After eliminating you, we were to plant evidence linking you to the pirate attacks. Make it look like you were the security leak all along. Elegant, Zyara commented. Eliminate the threat we pose to his operation while simultaneously discrediting any evidence we might have uncovered. Where's Trill? James demanded. Probably dead, the captive replied without emotion. Those were the orders if anyone was helping you. James felt a cold anger settle in his chest. Trill had likely sacrificed himself to get them that information. And what's Melkin's endgame? Why orchestrate pirate attacks against his own people? Don't know details, the captive shrugged. Something about creating a crisis to push through new security protocols. All I know is he's planning something big during tomorrow's council session. James and Zyara exchanged glances. Tomorrow's session is the final vote on the Collective Defense Treaty, Zyara noted. Perfect timing for a dramatic incident that would sway the vote his way, James agreed. After securing their prisoner and ensuring the data from Trill was intact. They spent hours analyzing the evidence. The patterns were clear once assembled. Melkin had been orchestrating the pirate attacks for months, using them to generate fear while positioning himself as a voice of peaceful resolution. His ultimate goal appeared to be a treaty that would give his faction control over all interstellar security, a treaty very different from the mutual defense pact James and Zyara were advocating. "We need to present this evidence to the Council," James decided as dawn approached. Zyara nodded agreement. "But Melkin will be prepared. He'll try to discredit us, or worse." "Then we need to be more prepared," James replied with a grim smile. "Time to show the Council exactly what Deathworlders are capable of when cornered." The Council chamber was more crowded than the previous day. Word had spread about the contentious debate between the Deathworlders and Ambassador Melkin, drawing additional spectators and media representatives from across the galaxy. Security had been visibly increased, with armed guards stationed at every entrance. When James and Zyara entered, a hush fell over the assembly. They had abandoned any pretense of diplomatic attire. James wore the formal uniform of Earth's Interstellar Defense Force, the midnight blue fabric accentuating his imposing physique. Medals and campaign ribbons adorned his chest, visual reminders of battles fought and won. Zyara had chosen traditional Kithrikian battle dress, a sleek, functional outfit with ceremonial markings denoting her clan and achievements. Together, they made no attempt to appear less intimidating. If the Council feared Deathworlders, today they would understand why that fear was justified, and why it could be an asset rather than a liability. As they took their seats, James noted Melkin's reaction. The ambassador's composure slipped momentarily, a flash of genuine alarm crossing his delicate features before he mastered himself. Clearly, he had expected his assassins to succeed. High Counselor Varix called the session to order. "Distinguished delegates, today we continue our discussion of the Collective Defense Treaty, with particular focus on response protocols for pirate incursions. Ambassador Melkin has requested to present new evidence regarding recent attacks." Melkin glided to the central podium, his movements graceful and measured. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice modulated to project sincerity, "recent events have only confirmed what many of us already feared. Violence begets violence. Militarization invites conflict." He activated a holographic display showing the aftermath of various pirate attacks, lingering on images of destruction from his own colony. "My own people have suffered terribly," he continued, his voice breaking with apparently genuine emotion. "But the solution is not to become like our attackers, not to invite dangerous elements." Here he glanced meaningfully toward James and Zyara, "into our peaceful society." James watched with grudging admiration. Melkin was skilled, playing perfectly to the Council's fears and pacifistic inclinations. The ambassador continued, outlining his alternative proposal, a security framework that would emphasize surveillance and information sharing rather than military response. And most importantly, Melkin concluded, this approach avoids the dangerous escalation that would inevitably result from deploying combat forces. "We must remember that peace is our highest calling." Approving murmurs rippled through the chamber. Melkin's faction nodded in enthusiastic agreement. Even some previously undecided delegates seemed swayed by his presentation. When Melkin returned to his seat, High Counselor Varix addressed the chamber. "Thank you, Ambassador. Now, before we proceed to general discussion, Delegates Hawkins and Zyara have requested an opportunity to present new information relevant to our deliberations." Melkin immediately rose in objection. "Respected Counselor, we have already heard the Deathworlders' militant perspective. Further delay serves no purpose when lives are at stake. All voices deserve to be heard," Varix replied firmly. "Delegates, you may approach." James and Zyara moved to the central podium with measured steps. James inserted Trill's data chip into the holographic projector while Zyara addressed the assembly. "Distinguished delegates," she began, her voice cool and precise. "Yesterday, we suggested that the pirate attacks showed evidence of insider knowledge. Today, we bring proof. The holographic display flickered to life, showing shipping manifestos, financial transactions, and communication logs, all linked to Melkin's office. This evidence, at great personal risk, was compiled by a council logistics officer who noticed irregularities, Zyara continued. Hours after providing this information to us, he was murdered by assassins hired by Ambassador Melkin, the same assassins who attempted to eliminate us. Gasps and exclamations of shock rippled through the chamber. Melkin leapt to his feet. This is outrageous. A fabrication designed to distract from their own agenda. James stepped forward. One of the assassins is currently in custody, ready to testify. But the evidence speaks for itself. He manipulated the display to highlight specific transactions. Military-grade weapons and tactical information, flowing from Ambassador Melkin's office to shell companies linked directly to the pirate operations that have been terrorizing our colonies. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted questions and accusations. Melkin's faction closed ranks around him protectively, while others demanded immediate investigation. High Counselor Varix was forced to activate the chamber's acoustic dampers to restore order. These are serious allegations that require thorough examination, he declared once the noise subsided. Ambassador Melkin, how do you respond? Melkin trembled with apparent indignation. This is a transparent attempt by these predators to undermine peaceful resolution. They crave conflict because violence is their nature. I demand these Deathworlders be removed from the chamber while a proper investigation is conducted. The evidence has been verified through multiple sources, James countered. And I note that Ambassador Melkin offers denial, but no explanation for the documented connections between his office and the pirates. Melkin's response was instant and unexpected. Security, he called out. Remove these dangerous individuals. They threaten the safety of this council. To James's surprise, several security personnel moved toward the podium, weapons drawn. Varix appeared equally startled. Ambassador, you do not have authority to command council security. I do when there is imminent threat. Melkin retorted. These creatures have already demonstrated their violent nature. Now they attempt to destabilize our governance with false accusations. James and Zyara exchanged a quick glance, a silent communication born of previous combat situations. Without a word, they shifted positions, backs to each other, facing the approaching guards. We mean no harm to the council, James announced clearly, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. But we will defend ourselves if necessary. The guards hesitated, clearly uncertain about engaging two Deathworlders in close combat. That momentary hesitation was all Zyara needed. Moving with blurring speed, she disarmed the nearest guard with a precise strike to the wrist, catching the weapon before it hit the floor. Simultaneously, James sidestepped another guard's advance, using the attacker's momentum to send him stumbling past. With economical movements, he neutralized two more guards, leaving them conscious but effectively immobilized with pressure point holds. The entire chamber watched in shocked silence as the two Deathworlders disabled a squad of trained security personnel without causing serious injury. The efficiency and control they displayed was perhaps more terrifying than overt violence would have been. Enough, Varix commanded, his gelatinous form pulsing with agitation. Security forces, stand down. Ambassador Melkin, explain yourself immediately. But Melkin had used the distraction to edge toward a service entrance. James noticed the movement and called out, "Stop him! He's escaping." Too late. Melkin slipped through the doorway. James moved to pursue, but froze when Melkin reappeared moments later, holding what was clearly a high-powered energy weapon, one far beyond what should have been allowed in the council chamber. "Stay back," Melkin commanded, his previous composure shattered. His delicate limbs trembled as he aimed the weapon toward the central dais where Varix and other senior counselors were located. "No one leaves until my shuttle is prepared for departure." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Even Melkin's closest allies appeared shocked by this turn of events. "Think about what you're doing, Ambassador," James said calmly, taking a measured step forward. "There's no scenario where this ends well for you. Stay back, Death Worlder." Melkin's voice rose hysterically. "Your kind has ruined everything. We had peace before you brought your violence to the stars." The pirate attacks began long before Earth or Kythrek joined the council, Zyara pointed out, also advancing slowly. "Your narrative doesn't match reality, Ambassador." "Reality?" Melkin laughed bitterly. "Reality is that soft worlds make soft species. The council has grown weak, unwilling to take necessary actions for true security." As he ranted, James and Zyara continued their careful advance, using the tiered seating of the chamber to approach from different angles. Council delegates cowered in their seats, many clearly experiencing their first exposure to genuine violence. "So that your solution was to manufacture a threat," James deduced, keeping Melkin's attention focused on him while Zyara circled behind. "Create attacks deadly enough to frighten the council, but controlled enough to avoid true catastrophe." "Precisely." Melkin seemed almost relieved to explain his logic. "A few casualties were regrettable, but necessary to demonstrate the need for stronger central authority. My security protocols would have saved countless lives in the long term. By undermining planetary sovereignty and installing surveillance systems controlled by your faction," Zyara added, now positioned behind a column just meters from Melkin, "creating a police state under the guise of protection." Melkin's weapon hand trembled more violently. "It would have worked perfectly if you Deathworlders hadn't interfered. Your paranoid militaristic mindset saw through what peaceful species accepted at face value." "That's what Deathworlders contribute to this council," James replied, close enough now that he could see the power indicator on Melkin's weapon glowing dangerously hot. "We recognize threats because we evolved facing them daily. We understand violence, so others don't have to experience it." With a desperate cry, Melkin swung the weapon toward James. "No more talking. Back away or I'll—" He never finished the sentence. Zyara launched herself from behind the column in a fluid motion that seemed almost impossible for any living creature. She struck Melkin's arm with precise force, redirecting the weapon's discharge into the ceiling as James simultaneously closed the distance and wrenched the device from the ambassador's grasp. Together, they restrained Melkin with swift efficiency that left the entire chamber in stunned silence. The ambassador's struggles against their hold appeared pathetically ineffective, a stark physical demonstration of the difference between species from gentle worlds and those forged in the crucible of death worlds. Security personnel, now clearly operating under Varix's authority rather than Melkin's, approached cautiously to take custody of the ambassador. As they led him away, still protesting his righteous intentions, the chamber remained eerily quiet. High Counselor Varix broke the silence. "I believe we owe Delegates Hawkins and Zyara our gratitude. Their quick actions prevented what could have been a tragedy." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly, though James noted many delegates still watched them with evident unease. Fear of Deathworlders hadn't disappeared, but perhaps it had been tempered with newfound respect. With the Council's permission, James addressed Varix. "We would like to continue our presentation on the Collective Defense Treaty. Recent events have demonstrated why a coordinated response protocol is essential." Varix gestured his consent, color patterns swirling in what James had learned to recognize as the Lemnian equivalent of a relieved sigh. "Please proceed, delegates. I believe you now have the Council's undivided attention." The remainder of the day's session proceeded with remarkable focus. With Melkin's faction thoroughly discredited, opposition to the defense treaty largely evaporated. James and Zyara outlined their proposal for a joint response force that would combine the diplomatic finesse of peaceful worlds with the tactical expertise of those from more challenging environments. By session's end, preliminary approval had been granted for the treaty framework, with a final vote scheduled for the following day. As delegates filed out of the chamber, many approached James and Zyara with a mixture of caution and newfound curiosity. "Is it true that humans engage in recreational combat?" one delegate inquired hesitantly. "We call it sports," James explained with a smile. It's how we channel competitive instincts constructively. Another delegate, a crystalline being from a low-gravity world, asked Zyra, how do Kithrikians endure constant environmental threats without developing psychological trauma? We embrace challenge as opportunity, she replied. What you see as threats, we view as teachers. The final day of the council session dawned with a markedly different atmosphere. News of Melkin's treachery and subsequent arrest had spread throughout the diplomatic community. The chamber buzzed with conversation as delegates took their seats, many casting curious glances toward the two Deathworlders who now commanded a strange mix of fear and admiration. High Counselor Varix opened proceedings with a formal acknowledgement. Before we proceed to today's final vote, the Council wishes to officially recognize Delegates Hawkins and Zyara for their service in uncovering a conspiracy against galactic peace. Their unique perspectives and capabilities proved invaluable. A round of applause, somewhat tentative at first, then growing stronger, filled the chamber. James and Zyara acknowledged it with formal nods, maintaining the dignified bearing expected of their positions. The vote that followed was largely procedural, with a collective defense treaty passing by an overwhelming margin. The framework established joint security patrols, intelligence sharing protocols, and rapid response units, all balanced by appropriate oversight mechanisms to address concerns about militarization. Following the formal session, a reception was held in the council's grand atrium. Crystalline fountains burbled pleasantly, while servers circulated with refreshments tailored to various species' biochemistries. They provided Earth whiskey, James noted with appreciation, examining amber-filled glass. Seems our diplomatic stock has risen, as has Kithrikian fire nectar, Zyara observed, holding a container of luminescent blue liquid. Though I noticed the serving staff still maintain a safety perimeter around us. James chuckled. Baby steps. At least they're curious rather than merely terrified now. Throughout the reception, delegates approached them with questions that would have been unthinkable days earlier. How did Deathworlders train for combat? What environmental adaptations had their species developed? How did they perceive threats so quickly? One particularly brave delegate, a floating gas-filled entity, drifted close to James and asked tentatively, is it true that humans voluntarily expose themselves to environmental toxins for pleasure? James blinked in, confusion before realizing the reference. Oh, you mean alcohol? It's not exactly toxic. Well, not in moderation. The delegate wobbled in what might have been astonishment. Fascinating. Such resilience. On my world, we consider atmospheric variations of 0.02% potentially hazardous. The conversation was interrupted when James absently clapped the delegate on what appeared to be a shoulder region. The impact, though gentle by human standards, sent the gaseous being spinning in disoriented circles, internal membranes visibly vibrating. "Oh hell, I'm sorry," James exclaimed, reaching out instinctively to stabilize the delegate before thinking better of it and withdrawing his hands. After regaining equilibrium, the delegate trembled with what James initially feared was distress, but then recognized as excitement. Remarkable. Such force from a casual gesture. Would you be willing to provide biometric data for our xenobiology archives? Before James could respond, Zyara smoothly intervened. Perhaps a discussion for another time. I believe High Counselor Varix wishes to speak with us. Indeed, Varix was approaching, his translucent body pulsing with colors that James had come to recognize as indicating thoughtful consideration. Delegates, Varix greeted them, his voice modulated to a soothing tone. I wanted to personally thank you for your service to the Council. Your actions have challenged many preconceptions, including your own. Zyara asked directly. Varix's colors shifted to a pattern that suggested amusement. Especially my own. I confess I harbored concerns about involving Deathworlders in Council affairs. Those concerns have not entirely disappeared, but they've been contextualized. You mean you've realized we're dangerous, but not to you? James translated bluntly. Precisely. Varix acknowledged. Your capabilities are formidable, even frightening by our standards. But your restraint is equally impressive. Not a single serious injury during yesterday's confrontation, despite ample provocation. James shrugged. Excessive force is inefficient. A very Deathworlder perspective, Varix noted. Efficiency rather than moral hesitation. Yet the outcome aligns with our peaceful values. Zyara's amber eyes studied the High Counselor. You're considering something. A proposal? Again, colors shifted through Varix's transparent form. Surprise, perhaps, at her perceptiveness. Yes. The Council Security Committee has recommended establishing a specialized advisory group focused on external threats. Your experiences and unique perspectives would be invaluable. You want us as consultants? James clarified. More than consultants. We envision a permanent role, with authority to train and lead rapid response units. A first line of defense against threats like the pirates, or worse dangers that may lurk beyond explored space. James and Zyara exchanged glances, communicating silently through subtle expressions honed during previous joint missions. We would need to consult with our respective governments, Zyara replied carefully. But speaking personally, I find the proposal intriguing. As do I, James agreed. Though there would need to be clear parameters. Bureaucratic interference in tactical operations would be unacceptable. Of course, Varix assured them. The Council recognizes that in matters of security, decisiveness is essential. We provide oversight, not micromanagement. Their conversation was interrupted by an aide who approached with urgent deference. After a brief, whispered exchange, Varix's colors darkened with concern. I apologize, but Council matters require my attention. Please consider our proposal. We will arrange formal discussions with your government soon. With a graceful undulation, Varix departed, leaving James and Zyara at the periphery of the gathering. Interesting development, James murmured, watching the assembled delegates. Some still regarded them with trepidation, but many more now displayed curious interest rather than fear. A permanent role with the Council wasn't in either of our mission parameters. No, Zyara agreed, her voice thoughtful. But it presents opportunities, a chance to build understanding between Deathworlders and the broader galactic community. Also a chance to ensure our worlds aren't marginalized in Council decisions, James added pragmatically. Earth and Kythrek have strategic interests that need protection. Zyara's lips quirked in a subtle smile. Always the soldier, thinking of strategic positioning. While you're not, James challenged with a raised eyebrow. I'm considering multiple dimensions, she replied, including the fact that Deathworlders working together might advance both our species' development. Humans have technical innovation. Kythrekians have biological adaptability. Together, we'd be even more terrifying, James finished with a grin. Precisely. As the reception continued around them, they discussed possibilities in quiet tones, training protocols for mixed-species units, technology exchanges, cultural adaptation programs. The conversation flowed naturally between them, two beings from harsh worlds finding common ground in a galaxy that both feared and needed them. Across the atrium, James noticed a group of delegates watching them with intense interest. We've attracted an audience, he noted. Zyara glanced in their direction. The Provisional Defense Committee, according to their insignia, likely evaluating their future advisors. Then let's give them something to think about. James straightened to his full height, shoulders squared in the posture that had intimidated officers and enemies alike throughout his military career. Beside him, Zyara shifted subtly, her predatory grace suddenly more pronounced, a reminder of evolution on a world where hesitation meant death. The watching delegates visibly tensed, some taking involuntary steps backward despite the considerable distance between them. Then James broke into a warm smile, raising his glass in a toast toward the group. After a moment of apparent confusion, one brave delegate hesitantly returned the gesture. Baby steps, Zyara murmured, echoing his earlier comment. They'll learn, James replied confidently. Deathworlders aren't just dangerous, we're dedicated. Once we commit to protection, we don't back down. A concept the Council will find both reassuring and disturbing, Zyara observed. The best kind of allies, James said with a smile. Reliable, but never taken for granted. As the reception wound down, delegates began departing for their respective quarters. James and Zyara remained until the end, consciously allowing others to leave first, a small courtesy to those still uncomfortable in their presence. Finally alone in the vast atrium, they walked toward the exit together, their footsteps echoing on polished stone. "So," James said casually, "ready to terrify the Council again tomorrow?" Zyara's amber eyes gleamed with subtle humor. "Always, though I suspect the terror will gradually transform to something else. Respect, eventually. For now, I'll settle for productive fear." James laughed, the sound resonating through the empty chamber. To productive fear, then, and to Deathworlders finding their place among the stars. Together they stepped through the massive doors, two predators from worlds that forgave no weakness, now tasked with protecting a galactic community that both feared and needed precisely what they offered, strength tempered by purpose, danger directed toward defense. Behind them, the Council chamber stood silent. Forever changed by the day, two Deathworlders walked in and left everyone terrified, but also perhaps a little wiser.